So we're going to move on to the last session. I'm going to hand back to Dan, who's going to chair the panel. We've got Mark Cartwright, Tanya, Sewell, Phoebe, and George is also coming back, who we didn't think we would have. So we're glad to have him. So over to you, Dan.
Great, thanks, Jamie. Yeah, always a bonus to have you, George. Thanks. So Saul and Phoebe are also waiting for, and I can't yet see Mark, but I'm sure as soon as he speaks, then Teams will do that thing where it kind of realizes that we want him to contribute and adds him into the panel. Great. I think it's been a really interesting conversation so far throughout the day. Obviously, there's been a lot of consistency through, sort of things that people have raised. And what I want to do in this last session is to try and sort of dig into that a little bit more, and also ask a few questions that sort of try and elicit the kind of the so what should we do differently because today happened. What do we take from it that will change the practices of our organizations, but also the work of the community. And I wanted to start with the question about leadership, actually. So Martin Heath asked this right at the start of the day, and we've sort of touched on it at various points. So leadership is undoubtedly vital in both instigating safety culture, but also seeing it through the organisational change process towards maturity. Interested in what the panel thinks are the most effective ways to stimulate engagement in road safety by leadership, whether that's political, commercial, or public. And I thought actually it's a really nice question, that, because it forces us to ask questions across domains, whether it's organizational leadership or the public discourse around culture, or your domain, George, which is in the political sphere. How do we get leaders right across the whole spectrum on board? So George, I want to then come to you first with a sort of, you've done a great job of getting buy-in from the political sphere. How have you done it? What's the trick?
I don't know. First of all, I'll make my apologies. I don't know why my computer started doing updates just as I was ready to present, and I was thinking, oh God, this has been recorded and everything's gone wrong here. But anyway, I think probably Scotland's history, so maybe decades probably before we've started, Dan, is that they've always been very interested in terms of road safety. I think that I must say, and I'm not just saying it because I work closely with her, but currently our Cabinet Secretary for Transport is incredibly interested, particularly around the way that the performance is going at the moment in Scotland. But going back, a couple of politicians before her, we sat down with them and spoke to them very openly and frankly around the way that road safety should be delivered and what we should be doing, and they fully backed that. So again, through the lifetime of the framework, the policy and the strategy is set. So I think that the open relationship that we had with them, and being able to kind of demonstrate exactly what we were hoping to achieve through the lifetime of the framework, I think got them on side. And why would any politician or country not want to save people's lives and have less disruption on the network, and not promote more sustainable ways to travel and kind of do all these different things? So I think that the one thing is that from a Scottish Government perspective, and clearly I am only a civil servant, but speaking from a Scottish Government perspective, is that there's a lot of strategies that intertwine and dovetail into each other and all support that common theme straight through. So whether that be 20 mile per hour, whether that be modal shift, people traveling actively and more sustainably, and road safety and everything else, it all plays a part into each other. So that's where I think that it's important that whilst we have that at the national level, what I have been really working on hard is how we try and drive that into that local level. As well, at local authority level, they're getting funding from us to do a number of things. So it's very important that they are kind of on that journey with us, right across the board. But I think that when you look at leadership more widely than that, I think that, right across all partner organisations that we have, whether it be emergency services, the real input of public health in Scotland and the interest in road safety is fabulous at the moment, again, and that's a growing and emerging relationship that we're developing. So I think that there's a lot of things. There is no silver bullet of how I can tell other countries or other ones to do it, unfortunately. I think there needs to be a willingness, but as I said, that you're in a pretty sad state of affairs if there's no willingness to save lives.
It's all right. We're not looking for silver bullets. I added that into the chat this morning. Systemic thinkers know that there are no silver bullets, so it's fine. Saul, I wonder whether sort of push that to you. Obviously, you've done quite a bit of work and you've drawn some attention to some sort of big corporates who've done this. And then I was going to bring Mark Cartwright in, because actually quite a lot of what DFBB is doing is trying to get that mentality down into the sort of the SME sector as well. So, yeah. I mean, you've already given some examples, Saul, but how do we stimulate that engagement amongst leaders, particularly the kind of corporate sector?
I think it's a variety of things. So there are some organisations where going in and laying out the financial case of it's just good business to do this works. I know that DFBB more recently have discovered that they've got quite a lot of people who are saying, can we not push the financial aspects, because actually we want to do it because it's the right thing to do, and we don't want the workforce to think that we're doing it because it's going to save us money. And that's important, because the getting that genuine communication of, if you're a boss who really cares about safety and you can convince your workers that you really care about safety, they will prioritize safety over getting the job done in the most expedient way. If they think that you're just paying lip service to it because you have to, then they'll carry on cutting corners, because they think, again, the comments that we've had from sort of drivers in various places around the world of, they talk a lot about safety, but they don't really mean it. And you have to either really mean it, or at least convince people that you really mean it. And it's much easier to convince people that you really mean it if you really do. So one of the things that I always encourage leaders to do is just be honest, and be honest with themselves. And actually, if your number one thing isn't safety, don't tell your workforce that it is, because they will tend to see through it. But also, if safety isn't your number one thing, then let's have a conversation where you try and explain that perspective to me, because if you can't articulate it, actually maybe a shift in your position is where you should be heading.
Yeah, it's really interesting, isn't it? That sort of authenticity of message, and you've picked up on this a couple of points today. It's like, let's not keep saying safety is the number one imperative if it patently isn't. We had a team meeting recently where we were talking about the importance of customer service, and I was heralding a large online retailer who many people might know for the fact that they do go the extra mile on their customer service. What I didn't know was that a member of our team used to work for them, and she said, yeah, they love their customers. It's just a shame that they hate their staff. Because actually her experience from the other end was all the priority is on this thing, and none of the priority is on staff welfare and some of those things. And I think that sense of authenticity in how we build an organization and how those values translate into our operation, hugely important.
I'm always reminded of there was a Dilbert cartoon where the pointy head boss says, we've been saying for years that our people are our most important asset. And actually we've done an audit and it turns out it's paper clips.
Very good.
And I think it's one of those things of, actually, no one's, and unless you treat people like safety is the most important thing, and you go about your business like safety is the most important thing. And another example from Abu Dhabi, working for a Shell joint venture there, and we were on our way to the sort of the lecture theatre in the building for the big global launch of this new, I can't remember what it was, but it was, Shell's chief exec was doing a big sort of, video cast to the whole of Shell. And we're busy walking through the building, and the guy who's the country manager just suddenly stops everyone because there's a vacuum cleaner cable trailing across the floor. And he made everyone stop while he unplugged it himself, and moved it out the way, and then everyone went past, and then he went, and instead of coming along to the big important video conference, he stood and had a word with the cleaner, and that sent a fabulous message to all the staff about actually the priority he was placing on safety.
Amazing. And she got a $20 bonus for leaving her vacuum cleaner out, so he could look good in front of the safety
That's right.
guys.
He paid her the $20 he'd already promised her beforehand. Yeah.
Great. Jamie, did you want to come in on that?
I was going to say that some companies are really good at safety, but not necessarily all safety. So, that especially things that are riddle reportable, there's often big things that people go through, but it's the bits that aren't riddle reportable that sometimes don't get mentioned, or it's a kind of small annex in the back sort of thing. And therefore, it's very clear what part of safety is important and some things get missed. So I think sometimes it's making sure that cultural maturity is through all risk, not just the reported risk, should we say.
And that's why actually that pathological stage of the maturity ladder is really important, because actually organizations can appear to be really good, but ostensibly all they're doing is covering for the things where they might get caught. That's, they're just trying to avoid ostensibly being prosecuted or found liable. And yeah, the need to move beyond that. Mark, I promised to come to you to say, just sort of how do you engage, particularly sort of those in the SME sector, at a leadership level, to start getting them to think about values in relation to their safety culture?
Yeah, thank you, Dan. I'd echo a lot of Saul's comments, to be honest. I get the fact that perhaps 20 years ago, when DFBB first saw the light of day, that you will save money, or at least not spend as much money if you crash less, was probably further up the priority list of organisations, or certainly getting attention. I don't think it is top of the tree anymore, as Saul said. I think an awful lot of businesses have got far more mature in the way that they look at things and actually recognise their role, and the moving towards the light rather than moving towards the pain in the way that they manage the risk. I guess with DFBB, we made a couple of pretty fundamental changes over the last 12, 18 months or so, just in kind of our approach, really. We used to spend a lot of time talking about compliance and supporting businesses to be compliant. We don't do that now. We talk about managing their risk and supporting them in managing their risk. And anybody who's heard me present over the last 6 months or so will know this position is I can show you lots of perfectly compliant vehicles and drivers that went out and killed people. It's about managing the risk, not managing the compliance. Of course, compliance is an important part of that, but it's about managing the risk. In terms of the SME piece, they're always really difficult to reach. So the second change that we made is we've kind of positioned ourselves more as a wholesale operation than a retail operation in terms of engaging with operators. So we now work increasingly closely and in concert with a number of partners. That can be a commercial organisation that's selling in to the commercial vehicle space, the SME space. It can be trade bodies, for example, we're working very, very closely with to pass that message from us through them to their clients, customers and members, which is working really well and developing quite a degree of momentum at the moment. So we've, just to name a couple, we've picked up a really good relationship with, for example, the scaffolding trade associations, the landscaping trade associations, Make UK. We've got a developing relationship with, but also a lot of the, commercial providers in there, lease companies, telematics providers, technology providers, etc. The SME bit is an interesting one as well, because they tend to be way more into a kind of van and potentially car space than the HGV space. So the reality of it is an awful lot of them, to be blunt, aren't necessarily that aware of the fact that they have responsibilities around the management of road risk. I guess that's partly lack of enforcement in that space. It's partly the lack of qualification. You don't need an O licence, you don't need CPCs and all the rest of it. I don't come across many, if I'm being blunt, who have any kind of malevolence in that approach. No. They just don't know what they don't know, is the honest answer. And I do agree with Jamie's point. most of these businesses are, pretty decent from an health and safety management point of view within their organisations, but they don't necessarily extend that awareness and activity into what's going out on the roads. They're pretty decent on site, on their building sites, in their production facilities, their offices, etc., etc. But to sound a little bit flippant, don't really do much more than pass somebody a set of keys, pat them on the head, and wish them the best of luck. And that's wrong. And my experience, again, to date through the DFBB process is where we can engage with health and safety professionals in organisations or via consultancies to get that message across. My God, they go at it like a dose of salt because they know how to manage health and safety. They just weren't doing it in a particular sector of their business, and they tend to have the authorities. The other thing I'll just pick up on, and again, it's thinking about something that Saul said, and I know this might sound a little bit the wrong way to phrase this. I think there's significant opportunities for health and safety professionals, people engaged in trying to manage this risk, to go down black holes, go down rabbit holes occasionally. I had a great example given to me a few months ago on a clocks webinar where I sat on, and the guy, again, like sort of been working in the Middle East. He had a meeting with the boss of this multinational organisation about what they were doing. And to paraphrase a little bit, when he went onto site, there was all kinds of signage about how the changing of those big water bottles on top of the water coolers was now a two-man job, and there was training available because somebody hurt their back. He actually showed his boss, or the guy he was working for, a photograph of one of the operatives of this organisation hanging off the back of a 4-metre high tipper trailer, which had shimmied up to replace the cargo restraint net on the top of it because stuff was falling off. Managed to fall off by irony, and he's good luck. He managed to catch his foot in the restraint net on the way down, and the photograph shows him swinging off the back of his trailer. And there were two real points to this. One, were you aware of this? And frankly, no, he wasn't, because it was out on the road, it was out round this corner and out the side. But the real message that got to me was, how many times has that guy got to lift that water cooler bottle up and before he kills himself? And the reality of it, he probably never would. That guy's only got to fall off that back of that trailer once, and he's probably killed himself, or at least severely injured himself. So it's about the proportionality of it. Yeah. I agree with the Riddle comment, absolutely. I know many organisations who, on the face of it, seem to take their Riddle reportable incidents more seriously, if I can put it that way, and investigate in greater depth if it is Riddle reportable, but road incidents aren't. And if it was to be blunt, a silver magic bullet that we could fire, that would be it. For me, I think that would greatly raise attention in that area. So that's kind of my thoughts, Dan.
Sure. Thanks for that, Mark. I think there's a number of things you touched on there, but actually, I don't know whether you were with us when Phoebe was talking earlier, but she had a really interesting point about violations and drawing attention to the fact that some of the things that people do, which we regard as violations, i.e. putting themselves outside of the safety system, aren't really, they to use your language, it's not malicious, it's not malevolent. They don't know what they don't know. They've had to address a set of circumstances that are in front of them. They've had to do the best that they could in the circumstances. The guy who's climbed onto the top of his tipper truck probably done so because he thought, well, it's better that I have a safe load. I mean, so therefore I'm addressing a safety issue. I'm just putting myself at risk and doing it. So Phoebe, I wonder whether I could bring you back in, because I thought your stuff on high reliability organizations was just excellent. And the thing that struck me was, sort of in terms of the definition you gave and the examples that you gave, they are organizations where the risks are extremely high. The cost of failure is massive. Yeah. But how do we get the culture of a high-risk organization into organizations whose DNA just isn't to think that what they're doing is that high risk, is that dangerous?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, because people do say, well, I'm an SME, or I'm what I do is doesn't have the potential to kill or harm lots of people, or destroy lots of businesses, and therefore why do I even need to think about high reliability organization elements and characteristics? And I think what I'd like to say is consider them, but you don't have to go to that extreme necessarily. It goes back to sort of proportionality and reasonable practicability. Just sorry, go on, Dan. There was the second part to your question. You said about trying to get it into your DNA.
Yeah, I think that was the thing that struck me. So, look, if you are an organization that sets out to generate nuclear power, you are aware that this thing has got massive consequences.
Yeah.
So it starts right in the beginning of the organization. But I guess what we're trying to ask is how do we get it into the organization down the road?
In the first place, yes, and that was the other point that I wanted to make. Is we go into a lot of organisations, such as the nuclear sector, but other. I'm thinking about sort of power generation as well, where there are and chemicals, where there are truly hazardous situations, and yet there are also how do I put this, sort of more personal safety side of things, and all the emphasis is on the high risk situation. So it's really interesting that somebody sort of said, within a building site, or I'm using a building site as an example, within a contained space, everything is really well controlled, and yet there's this blind spot. So we see when it comes to sort of transport on roads. So what else do I want to? I mean, it's about, I suppose it's also about taking small steps as well. It's about sort of eating the elephant in small bites. It is a long-term commitment, and it's about what we say to organisations is think about what you're doing already. So they're already doing an awful lot already, and don't reinvent the wheel. Give yourself credit for what you're doing, see what you can ride on the back of. And the other thing that we say to organisations is evaluate. So we don't see people evaluating interventions enough, and they don't know whether what the control measures that they're putting in place are actually having any effect at all. So it's about deciding what effective looks like, and again, that's up to an organisation to decide, and then monitoring it. And then if it's having the effect, that's absolutely fantastic. And if it's not having the effect, it's then having the confidence to say, do you know what, something's not going quite right here, and speaking to staff or considering why an intervention might not be working. And if push comes to shove, actually saying, right, for whatever reason this intervention isn't working, let's put it on one side. So it's about it comes back to this sort of learning organisation ethos, if you like, that we're not necessarily going to do things right the first time, and it is a process of learning, possibly a little bit of pain in the meantime, and not sort of personal pain when somebody has injury, but maybe business pain, because we're going to invest in something that might not be quite hitting the mark, as it were. Working together and learning and sharing and I was going to use the word admitting, but I don't like that because that is a very negative word, but having the confidence to share and learn from others, so that you don't have to go through that learning. You can, and there's, I mean, a high reliability organisation takes every opportunity to learn. I'm going to stop there because I could just go on and on.
No, that's great, and actually very much frames where I wanted to go. I was going to go to our queen of evaluation, who is Tanya. Because I think that learning piece is something that has come through very clearly, and I quite liked Caitlin's language actually from ROSPA, where she talked about moving from who caused the problem to why wasn't this failure averted. So it wasn't about admitting the mistake, but it was saying this thing happened. I'm just interested, Tanya, on your sort of thoughts. You've often challenged the sector to be open about stuff that doesn't work as much as does work. How do we start to make that move?
Everything Phoebe's just said is just music to my ears, because it is the drum that I bang constantly. I think we do have to be much more open to learning from what works and what doesn't work. Probably what doesn't work is much more important. And I think with the safe system in particular, that shared responsibility is at the heart of it, and the acknowledgement that people make mistakes. So, as Mark's just talking about with compliance and violations, actually, we've got to look at how the system failed, not just how one individual. So what other data sets can we compile and analyze collectively in a non-judgmental way? It's not about the blame here necessarily, but where are the weaknesses in that system? Saul can obviously talk about lots and lots of experience of doing this, but also at a road safety perspective at a local level. But I think it's, if we are open to that approach of how could we have all done something differently here to in the Swiss cheese model, kind of put another barrier in place to stop that incident from happening, it would make a big difference. The Swedes have got a very interesting approach here where they backcast and they look at incidents from 10, 15 years ago, and could that crash have happened today because the road design has changed, or the speed limit's different, or the vehicles involved are different? If it could still happen today because there are some weaknesses, well, what could we do about it to stop a similar one happening?
That's really interesting. Right, I'm aware that we've only got sort of 5 minutes or so left for our discussion. And one of the key things that I wanted to explore is we're running this as the Parliamentary Advisory Council for Transport Safety, and our purpose is to try and move the dial on road safety policy, advance the evidence, and get parliamentarians and politicians to think about, you know, the bit that they can play, the bit that they can do to ensure the enhancement of safety. So I'm just going to go around the room and say, you know, what do you think we could be doing as PACTS and the broader community in order to be encouraging stronger cultures in organisations, and particularly the policy and sort of national measures that might help us to facilitate that? So George, I'm going to come to you first. Things that you would like to see us doing that help to strengthen that culture nationally.
Well, I think that there's a good few things that I would like to change which are not within my gift. So reserve matters, that I think that I would like to see changing around the kind of licensing and various bits and pieces, and really us tackling key priority areas that we need to do. I think that we need to have a clear vision collectively of everybody kind of pulling in the same direction and moving in the same direction. And for me, I think that it's something that in Scotland we're setting it from the kind of highest levels and kind of working our way down to then laying the foundations and working back up again. But I think that it's kind of raising awareness, education and training is so important. I think that there has been very little done in the kind of road safety area for some time, that not as kind of letting giving organisations and people the chance to kind of develop and thrive and flourish and move forward, I think is probably the biggest thing. Because I think that if that's why we've tried to invest in it in Scotland, Dan, because if we don't do it, we're not going to get that systematic change that we need. So I think that that's at the heart of it. Get the foundation sorted first and foremost, and then move forward with everything else.
Great. Saul, I'm coming to you next.
I think for me, it kind of circles back a little bit to the thing we were talking about before about, be honest with ourselves of, actually, do we think we're killing about the right number of people? Is 5 people a day about the right number of people to be killing? If the answer is no, then a bit like with TfL and the direct vision standard, we need to not just, yes, it'd be lovely to have a road safety strategy, and it'd be great to have some targets, and it'd be great to have, sort of a vision and safe system and all that. But actually, that's the equivalent of a fleet saying, yeah, we're just going to be legally compliant. Those things should be the base level for what you should have as a country. Just saying, oh yeah, well, we're gonna set our tire tread depth at the legal minimum. That's not having a policy on tire tread depths. Just having a road safety strategy isn't addressing road safety. So yeah, the first thing to do would be to do the 4 things that are in the PACTS manifesto, which is why they're in the manifesto. And the next thing would be to go, okay, let's sit down with a blank sheet of paper, and like with the direct vision standard, like with the Scotland lowering the drink drive limit, let's look at the stuff which isn't necessarily going to be easy, which isn't necessarily going to be popular, Wales 20 miles an hour, and actually say, no, if we're serious about this, what are the things that we need to do, or at least try to do, to really make a difference? It's that kind of step change moment, because if we carry on doing the same sort of thing, things will get a little bit better, but a whole load of people will be dead and injured.
Yeah, for sure. Mark, what's on your wish list?
I guess it's an awareness thing, really, Dan, if I'm being perfectly honest. One of the things that was just coming to my mind as, George and Saul was speaking and Phoebe, is we know 5 people die on our day on our roads on a fairly typical day. We know that. This is a group of the converted that we're in. I speak to lots of organisations where, to be blunt, it seems to come as a complete surprise to them that 5 people are dying on our roads today. And maybe it wasn't one of the most politically correct moments I had in a presentation a while ago, but it was at the time that there was that terrible news story of the 8 people that died trying to cross the channel in that inflatable that went down, and it was all over all the news channels for days. And the point I was making is, where was a news piece that said, sorry, this is a bit boring, but another 5 people died on our road today, and I'll be back again tomorrow with a similar report, and probably the day after. And people just don't seem to get it. They're not aware. And I think most people will react in a fairly positive, supportive kind of manner the more we're able to position the fact that this is happening and actually it isn't right and we should be doing something about it. So that would be kind of one of my big things, just shining a light on the size of the problems. I think an awful lot of individuals and organisations are kind of blissfully unaware of it.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you. Phoebe, what's on the wish list for you?
Well, I won't speak on behalf of my HSE colleagues who are far more informed about the transport sector than me, but maybe if I speak sort of more generally from going into organisations and what sort of frustrates me, or what I would recommend. So some of the things are around sort of the wider target. So if you remember, one of my slides was around the wider target. So when we go into sort of and I'm not making a political statement here, but some of the energy distribution and generation and hospitals and things, and they say, yeah, but we've got targets coming down from on high. So I don't know whether we need to be thinking about the very top level drivers here, regardless of which government we're under at the moment. The other thing I think with Mark is about awareness. I mean, it does stagger me. I obviously live and breathe health and safety, but it does stagger me just how much effort is put into sort of publicising health and safety, and people still aren't aware. Now, I'm not blaming people. They lead very busy lives, but maybe we need to think about how we communicate particularly. And years ago, we had what's called a Good Neighbour scheme. I don't know whether any of you remember, where large organisations work with smaller organisations to support them in health and safety. So something else is around sort of contractors and working with contractors and coming together. I see this in the construction sector, where people are sort of bidding against each other, and of course health and safety it costs, and therefore how do we get our how do we win the work? Well, one of the easy ways of doing it is health and safety, but it's actually maybe having I'm going to use the polite word guts to stand up and say, no, actually we're going to put in a bid and we want to raise the sector, we want to raise the standard of the sector. I don't know, I hope some of this is relevant to the transport sector, but this is some learning from sort of other sectors. Mark, back to you.
I couldn't agree more, Phoebe, to be honest. Is something that we've been trying to socialise for quite a while now, is this terrible phrase of power of procurement. You wouldn't bring somebody in to fulfil a role for you in our place, build a bridge or manage a geography of road or whatever, unless we were pretty sure they knew how to do that. But businesses don't seem to apply the same kind of weighting towards whether or not they can operate a fleet properly and safely, and be a demanding client is basically the message. Is you wouldn't accept it in other areas of their operation, so why should we accept it in this area?
Yeah, that's great. And there's plenty of examples. I think particularly of the London context, where they've stipulated very rigorous standards for utilising, bringing freight onto their network, for example. Tanya, I'm going to give you the last word. So your wish, we're only, 5.5 weeks from Christmas or something. What would you like to get in your stocking for the enhancement of safety culture across the transport sector?
On everybody else, because many of them are on my list, but I think it is linking to the other co-benefits actually that we've got here, the other policy pieces that we've got within government here related to health and the environment and the economy. How do we make sure that we embed road safety into all of that, that we prove that not only is it 5 people a day, but actually having safe roads can contribute to all of those other missions as well, and therefore we've got double the benefit here if we collaborate and take this seriously.
Fantastic. Thumbs up from Oh, and an applause. I mean, goodness, nobody else got that. Great. Jamie, I think I'm handing back to you, but just to say very much appreciated to our panel, to Saul, to Tanya, to Mark, and to Phoebe. And Jamie, back to you to wrap up for us.
Yes, so I have to admit I can't remember if I thanked National Highways and Department of Transport for sponsoring the event. I should have done that at the start, so I'm doing it now. Yes, so they've helped fund this to bring it together. So thank you very much for that. We should have a slide which was from the last question I asked. So if we can bring that up, this should be our sort of word map thing in there. So we will share this as well. But so training seems to be a big one in there. Mandates, awareness, communications. So perhaps communications are a big one. Behaviors. So and yeah, culture, ownership, knowledge, no blame. Yeah. So that's good to see. Last couple of things that I want to do. So I need to thank all the panel members, the presenters and everything for giving your time to share your knowledge, the audience for taking part. And just a couple of things that sort of came out for me is, you know, we do seem to have a lack of data and reporting. It would be good to sort of think about how we can sort that out. And I really liked on Luca's presentation about the fact that this seems to sit with the individual as a driver in a company setting rather than the company, and it's how do we sort of turn that round. So that's what I'm taking away and having to think about with this. But I've enjoyed it. I hope everyone else has. So I'm going to wrap it up 4 minutes early. But yeah, thank you very much. And like I say, we will be sharing the slides. They'll be on our website, but I also hope to do some LinkedIn posts, and we'll perhaps do, you know, a weekly one where we'll share the presentations and generate a bit more coverage and interest in it, and hopefully you know, we can move this forwards. But yeah, I'd just like to flag that there's lots of we saw some examples of what's available out there to help companies manage risk and those areas. So please have a look, please make use of them, and yeah, hopefully we can make a difference and move this forward. So thanks a lot and enjoy the day. Okay, bye.